You're scrolling through vacation deals. A 7-night Caribbean cruise pops up. $400 per person. Unlimited food, ocean views, paradise, right? Maybe. Or maybe you've just booked a floating nightmare. Because here's what the glossy brochures don't show you. Sewage running down the walls. Passengers airlifted off tilting decks in hurricane-force winds. Disease outbreaks that turn entire ships into quarantine zones. And health inspections so bad that the government literally fails them. This isn't fear-mongering. This is documented, verified, on the record. And if you're planning to step foot on a cruise ship anytime soon, you need to know exactly which ones have the worst track records, why they failed, and what the cruise industry desperately hopes you never find out. Let's start with the most infamous cruise disaster in modern history. February 2013, the Carnival Triumph. Over 4,000 passengers boarded in Galveston, Texas, expecting a 4-day trip to Cozumel, Mexico. What they got instead was an 8-day nightmare that would permanently scar the cruise industry's reputation. On the 4th day, a fire broke out in the engine room. The automatic suppression system put out the flames, but the damage was already done. Power cables were burnt to a crisp. The entire ship went dark. No electricity meant no air conditioning, no refrigeration, no functioning plumbing. Think about that for a moment. Over 4,000 people, 0 working toilets. Within hours, sewage began backing up into the hallways. Passengers described raw human waste seeping through carpet, running down walls, pooling in stairwells. People compared the smell to a zoo. Others said it was like being trapped in a sewer. The cruise line handed out red biohazard bags. That's right. Thousands of paying customers were now using plastic bags as toilets. Crew members lined hallways with these bags, and passengers watched in horror as the pile grew larger every hour. Food supplies ran dangerously low. What little they had couldn't be properly stored without refrigeration. The ship was drifting in the Gulf of Mexico, and strong currents pushed it farther from the original Mexican port. The Coast Guard ultimately had to reroute the tow to Mobile, Alabama instead, adding days to the ordeal. Passengers created a tent city on the upper decks, stringing bed sheets between lounge chairs just to escape the unbearable heat and stench inside. Some started hoarding food. Arguments broke out. A few passengers later described the conditions as primitive and post-apocalyptic. The media dubbed it the Poop Cruise. The name stuck, but here's the part that should make you furious. Company documents revealed the Carnival Triumph had known mechanical issues for over a year before this voyage. The diesel generator that failed? It was overdue for maintenance. There had been 9 separate fuel line incidents in the previous 2 years. 2 weeks before the disaster, the ship experienced propulsion problems that delayed its return to port. The ship never should have set sail. Carnival eventually paid out settlements, spent over $500 million on fleet-wide safety upgrades, and quietly renamed the ship Carnival Sunrise in 2019, as if a fresh coat of paint could erase what happened. But the Triumph wasn't even close to the worst that could happen. January 2012. The Costa Concordia, an Italian cruise ship carrying over 4,000 passengers, ran aground off the Tuscan island of Giglio. The ship capsized, killing 32 people in one of the deadliest cruise disasters in history. The cause? The captain had deviated from the approved course to perform a salute near the island, sailing dangerously close to shore. The ship struck a reef and began flooding. What happened next was chaos. The captain, Francesco Schettino, abandoned ship while hundreds of passengers were still on board. He later claimed he fell into a lifeboat. Investigators found he left the vessel when more than 300 people hadn't yet evacuated. The Coast Guard commander famously screamed at him over the radio, "Get back on board!" The recording went viral. Schettino was eventually convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 16 years in prison. The Costa Concordia disaster didn't just claim lives. It permanently damaged the reputation of its parent company. And yet Costa Cruises, which is owned by Carnival Corporation, continues to operate today. In fact, Costa consistently ranks as one of the worst-rated cruise lines in the world. Reviewers describe dirty cabins, cold food, language barriers that leave English-speaking passengers completely in the dark, and customer service that ranges from unhelpful to outright aggressive. One passenger wrote, This was the worst cruise I've ever experienced in over 20 years and more than 50 voyages. Safety concerns. Sanitation failures. Crew members who couldn't even locate muster stations. Another simply said, "When they have captains who sink their cruise ships, they're not a cruise line I would look into anyway, and they're not wrong to be concerned, because even when cruise ships don't sink, they can still turn into floating biohazard zones." In 2024, the CDC recorded 16 gastrointestinal outbreaks on cruise ships. That's the highest number in over a decade. Most were caused by norovirus, a violently contagious stomach bug that spreads through contaminated surfaces, food, and water. If you've never had norovirus, count yourself lucky. Within hours of exposure, you're hit with explosive vomiting and diarrhea. It comes on fast, hits hard, and spreads like wildfire. You're contagious before you even show symptoms, which means by the time one person gets sick, they've already spread it to dozens of others in dining halls, elevators, and pool areas. The virus can survive on surfaces for weeks. Every door handle, every railing, every buffet serving spoon becomes a potential transmission point. Hand sanitizer stations are everywhere on cruise ships. But here's what most passengers don't know. Alcohol-based sanitizers barely work against norovirus. Only thorough hand washing with soap and water actually kills it. December 2024 was particularly brutal. 6 cruise ships reported outbreaks in a single month. The Queen Mary 2, a luxury Cunard liner, had over 240 passengers fall ill during a transatlantic voyage. That's nearly 10% of the passengers on what's supposed to be a premier luxury experience. Holland America's Rotterdam and Zuiderdam were both hit. Princess Cruises' Ruby Princess saw infections spread through the ship. And here's what most people don't realize. Cruise ships are legally only required to report outbreaks when at least 3% of passengers show symptoms. That means dozens or even hundreds could be sick before it becomes official. But disease outbreaks aren't the only thing you should worry about. Some ships are simply filthy. The CDC's vessel sanitation program sends inspectors on unannounced visits to cruise ships in U.S. waters. They check food storage, water systems, pools, spas, medical facilities, kitchens. A passing score is 86 out of 100. Most ships score in the mid-90s. Some ships fail spectacularly. In September 2024, Hapag-Lloyd's Hanseatic Inspiration scored a 62. That's not just a failing grade. It's one of the lowest scores in the entire history of the inspection program. The 6th worst ever recorded. MSC Seaside scored a 67 in 2023. Inspectors found violations, including improper food safety procedures, inadequate sanitation, and equipment failures. Carnival ships have repeatedly appeared near the bottom of inspection lists, with the Breeze, Elation, and Miracle all scoring in the mid to high 80s. Now, to be fair, cruise lines usually correct these violations within weeks. A failed inspection doesn't mean the ship is permanently dirty, but it does raise a question. If these are the conditions inspectors find during surprise visits, what's happening when no one's watching? And sanitation concerns pale in comparison to what happened aboard the Viking Sky. March 2019. The Norwegian coast. A luxury cruise ship carrying over 1,300 passengers lost all engine power during a severe storm. Waves reached nearly 50 feet. Winds exceeded 75 miles per hour. The Viking Sky began drifting toward rocky shores. At one point, the ship came within 100 meters of running aground. Had it struck the rocks, officials later said, it could have been one of the worst maritime disasters in modern history. Inside the ship, passengers experienced sheer terror. Furniture slid across rooms, windows shattered, ceiling tiles collapsed. One massive wave burst through glass doors in the main restaurant, sweeping passengers across the floor. An elderly woman described being thrown from her chair repeatedly as the ship rolled. Her husband couldn't hold on to her as waves sent her sliding across the deck. Many passengers thought they were going to die. Norwegian rescue helicopters were dispatched. One by one, passengers were hoisted on cables into aircraft hovering above the tilting vessel. Nearly 500 people were airlifted to safety before engineers finally restarted the engines, and the ship limped into port. The official investigation revealed a damning truth. The Viking Sky should never have sailed. One of its 4 diesel generators was out of service before departure. The ship's lubricating oil levels were insufficient for the rough conditions it encountered. The sump tank design didn't comply with international safety regulations, and the crew had never practiced recovering from a full blackout without a standby generator. The Norwegian Safety Investigation Authority concluded the accident had the potential to develop into one of the worst disasters at sea in modern times. Viking Cruises faced a class action lawsuit. Passengers alleged the company negligently sailed through notoriously perilous waters into the path of a bomb cyclone, despite weather warnings issued a full week in advance. And then there's the cruise line that seems to generate more negative reviews than any other. MSC Cruises. Search for MSC reviews online, and you'll find page after page of complaints. Overcrowding so severe that passengers can't find seats in dining areas. Elevator waits exceeding 10 minutes. Buffet lines lasting 15 to 20 minutes. Air conditioning failures. Cabins that smell like bleach or cigarettes. Food described as bland, repetitive, and inedible. The language barrier is a constant issue. MSC is an Italian company, and many ships make announcements primarily in Italian, Spanish, or German. English-speaking passengers report feeling completely lost, missing important information about port arrivals, emergency procedures, and onboard events. One reviewer wrote, "I've been on cruises for over 30 years. This was the worst experience of my life." Another said, "The customer experience is the worst ever. I would not recommend anyone try MSC." Perhaps most disturbing, several passengers have reported fights breaking out on MSC ships. In at least one incident, a passenger was killed during an onboard altercation. And that brings us to something the cruise industry really doesn't want you thinking about: crime at sea. In the first half of 2024 alone, the Department of Transportation recorded over 35 serious incidents on cruise ships embarking from U.S. ports. That includes physical assaults, sexual assaults, and rape cases. Sexual assault is by far the most common serious crime reported on cruise ships. In 2023, there were 131 sex crimes reported to the FBI from cruise vessels, 52 sexual assaults, 79 rapes. When crimes happen on cruise ships, investigation becomes complicated. The ships often sail under foreign flags, which means they're subject to different laws than those of the passengers' home countries. Evidence can be lost or compromised before reaching authorities. Witnesses disperse to different countries when the voyage ends. Security footage mysteriously disappears. Victims are sometimes pressured to stay quiet to avoid ruining the vacation for other passengers. Some have reported being told by ship staff to not file a formal complaint until they returned home, by which point crucial evidence was gone and memories had faded. And then there are the passengers who simply vanish. In 2024, there were 19 confirmed man overboard incidents across the cruise industry. Not all of these are accidents. Some are suicides. Some involve alcohol or drug use. Some remain mysterious. A 50-year-old man went overboard after reportedly losing a significant amount of money in a casino. A 53-year-old military veteran fell overboard after an argument with his wife. A young passenger in his early 20s went over the railing at 3 in the morning and was never found. Cruise lines have improved their surveillance systems in recent years. Many ships now have sensors that can detect when someone falls overboard. But once you're in the ocean at night, miles from shore, your chances of survival drop dramatically with every passing minute. So with all of this documented, why do people keep booking cruises? Because the industry has mastered the art of making disasters disappear. The Carnival Triumph became the Carnival Sunrise. Costa Cruises still operates despite the Concordia disaster. Ships that fail health inspections get re-inspected and pass a few weeks later. Crime statistics are buried in quarterly reports that almost no one reads, and the pricing structure is designed to hook you before you realize what you're actually paying for. That $400 cruise? By the time you add mandatory gratuities, port fees, taxes, beverage packages, specialty dining, Wi-Fi, and shore excursions, you might be paying triple the advertised price. Daily gratuities alone can run $16 to $25 per person per day. A family of 4 on a 7-night cruise could see $500 or more added to their bill just for tips. Room service now costs $8 to $10 per order on most major lines, plus an 18 to 20% gratuity on top of that. Yes, you read that correctly. A gratuity fee on top of a service fee. It's absurd. Some cruise lines add automatic service charges of 20% to every single purchase you make on board. Drinks at the bar, spa treatments, specialty restaurants. Each one comes with hidden fees that weren't in your original booking. Shore excursions sold by the cruise line are often marked up significantly over what you'd pay booking the same tour directly. Internet packages can cost $20 a day or more for painfully slow connections. Alcoholic beverages run $10 to $15 each. Even soda requires a package or costs $3 to $4 per glass. The cruise lines count on you not doing this math until you're already on board with your credit card linked to your cabin. By then, you're captive. There's no walking next door to a competitor. There's no leaving a bad review before they've already charged your card. So what should you actually do if you want to cruise without disaster? First, research the specific ship, not just the cruise line. Older vessels tend to have more mechanical issues and smaller cabins. Some ships have better sanitation records than others. The CDC publishes all inspection scores publicly online. Second, read recent reviews, not the promotional content on the cruise line's website. Look for independent reviews from the past 6 months. Pay attention to patterns. If dozens of people mention the same problem, it's probably real. Third, understand what's actually included. Get the final price with all fees before you book. Ask specifically about gratuities, port charges, and what's covered in dining. Fourth, check the weather and the route. If your itinerary takes you through areas known for rough seas or storm patterns, know what you're signing up for. Fifth, wash your hands constantly, not with hand sanitizer, with soap and water. Norovirus is resistant to alcohol-based sanitizers. The only way to kill it is thorough hand washing. Sixth, consider your travel companions carefully. If you're traveling with elderly relatives or anyone with mobility issues, understand that evacuation from a cruise ship in an emergency is brutally difficult. Helicopters can only take one person at a time. Stairs become death traps when a ship is listing. Medical facilities on board are basic at best. Finally, accept that you're trusting your safety to a company that prioritizes profit over everything else. That's not cynicism. That's the documented reality. These companies registered their ships in foreign countries specifically to avoid stricter labor laws and safety regulations. They fight tooth and nail against any legislation that would make them more accountable. When disasters happen, their first response is damage control for the brand, not transparency for the passengers. The cruise industry served over 37 million passengers in 2024. Most of them had perfectly fine vacations, but the ones who didn't, the ones who ended up sick, stranded, traumatized, or worse, they were on the same ships you're looking at right now. The question isn't whether bad things can happen on cruise ships. They absolutely can, and they absolutely do. The question is whether you're going to book blindly based on a pretty picture, or actually know what you're getting into before you step on that gangway. Because once that ship leaves port, you're not a passenger anymore. You're trapped.